What's up, friendos? It's Superlimie, and today I will be doing something a little different. It will still be a Sim speed build in the background, but I will be doing a true crime video. Whoa! I'm thinking about doing this about once a month, where I talk about some of my favorite crime cases. Today I'm going to start with one of my favorite cases. It's a serial killer. It's a Canadian serial killer. His name is Gilbert Paul Jordan. He was known as the Boozy Barber, and he was born in 1931 and lived in Vancouver, British Columbia. Now, Jordan was a former barber. He had a lengthy criminal record. Some charges he racked up starting from 1952 included convictions for rape, indecent assault, abduction, hit and run, drunk driving, and car theft. Jordan was a known alcoholic. He was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. The thing that makes his case as a serial killer so interesting to me is that though he was caught, he could never be charged with murder. Now, Jordan was a man who took advantage of a major issue in Canada. His victims were not only sex workers, a group where crimes generally are ignored, especially in the 50s through 80s, but also most of his victims were indigenous women. If you're unaware, Canada has a large amount of murdered and missing indigenous women that are cold cases. From what I checked, activists working for the Walk for Justice initiative started collecting names of missing and murdered indigenous women and stopped counting after hitting 4,232 women. So they literally stopped counting after they hit that number. The RCMP released that there was over 1,000 cases, but these people took it upon themselves to actually count. I just want to make sure people know about this before I talk about Jordan's murders, because I feel like it's a serious point where these women were all failed because of this. Now, Jordan was called the Boozy Barber because he was known for consuming over 50 ounces of vodka a day, which is insane. That's like taking 50 shots. So he was drunk all the time. The reason he couldn't be convicted was because Jordan would hire sex workers, encourage them to drink with him. After encouraging them to drink large amounts of alcohol, he would do this until they passed out. And then he would pour alcohol down their throats while they were passed out to the point that they would have alcohol poisoning and die. The first woman known to die in his company was Ivy Rose. She was found naked and dead in a hotel room. She had a blood alcohol level of 0.51, which is lower, but that's when they found her. No charges were laid against him. This would become his pattern. Over the course of more than 2 decades, he would be linked to over 8 to 10 deaths this way that he would kill, 6 of which were indigenous women. Though these are the only deaths they can link, he was known for searching out over 200 women per year. So who can really actually tell how many women may have fallen victim to his ploy? So when we jump to 1987, Vanessa Lee Buckner was found naked on the floor of the Niagara Hotel after being with Jordan the previous night. There was debate over her being a sex worker and not a heavy drinker. However, the court record shows to describe Buckner's death as a result of Jordan, quote, supplying a lethal amount of liquor to a female alcoholic who has died as a result, unquote. Now, when you look at that, you're looking at someone who was not a known alcoholic, and people were arguing with that, but the courts ruled that she was an alcoholic, and it kind of is pointing oh, it's her fault. He supplied the alcohol, but it's her fault, which is just so messed up. But this was kind of a sign of the times, and it's still something that happens to sex workers today. Now, afterwards, Jordan's fingerprints were found linked to her death. About a month after Buckner's death, another woman named Edna Shade was found dead in another hotel. After being questioned, Jordan had not been charged with any crime related to Buckner's death. However, police initiated surveillance on Jordan. Between October 12th through November 26, 1987, the police watched Jordan. A quote from the police says he would search out Native Indian women in the Skid Row area of Vancouver. On 4 different occasions, they, referring to the police, rescued women involved before she too became a victim. They actually have these 4 women's names listed of the women that were rescued by. According to court records, the police would listen outside the hotel rooms, and they heard Jordan say, quote, "Have a drink. Down the hatch, baby. $20 if you drink it down. See if you're a real woman. Finish that drink. Finish that drink. Down the hatch. Hurry, right down. You'll need another drink. I'll give you $50 if you can take it. I'll give you $10, $20, $50, whatever you want. Come on. I want to see you get all down. Get it right down. I'll give you the $50 and $13. I'll give you $50. I told you that. If you finish your drink, I'll give you $75. Finish your drink, I'll give you $20. And so on. This was continued for a long time. So he was on record just encouraging these women to drink and taking advantage of the situation that they clearly were in need of money. They were, sex workers, and a lot of times those are can be very vulnerable people. Not all the time, but, sometimes. Especially in the situation where he had been picking them up from a very poor area. Now, this fact evidence was important for Jordan's 1988 trial. Jordan was tried before only a judge, so there wasn't even a jury. Jordan, after 23 years from the first murder he could be linked to, was found guilty of manslaughter in the death of Buckner. Jordan was sentenced to only 15 years, which was reduced to 9 years on appeal. Jordan managed to only serve 6 years and was released on probation, which restricted him to only living on Vancouver Island. In June 2000, Jordan had been charged with sexual assault, negligence causing bodily harm, and administering a noxious substance, alcohol. Jordan was arrested again in 2002 for breaching his probation when he was found drinking in the presence of a woman, and he had been in possession of alcohol. He was found guilty and sentenced to 15 months, and followed by 3 years of probation. At this point, he had ended up moving around a couple times. He'd been going to Manitoba and Saskatchewan, so some of these cases happened in different areas, but because he was pretty well known in the Vancouver area. Again, in 2004, Jordan was arrested for violating his probation. He was identified at a party binge drinking with Barb Berkeley. Berkeley was a long-term resident at a hotel with a known drinking problem. She was brought to the hospital by her friends and a hospital worker in very bad condition the next morning. She was identified to be drinking with Jordan and him being there, but he was acquitted of all charges related to Berkeley in 2005. Upon his release, there was a warning issued to the public about Jordan. And then the following year, he died in 2006. So this man was 75 when he finally passed away. Just the thing that just shakes me about this case is that they know he killed these women. They know that he forced the alcohol down their throats, but they can't prove it. And also, their deaths get ruled alcohol poisoning, so he never officially could get charged with murder. Not to mention, this man was let out several times after going to jail for these things and was still doing the things that he was arrested for. And it's just such a hard thing to prove. And my major thing with this is that he was clearly taking advantage of a situation in which really the police never really care. Oh, it's a prostitute, and it's an indigenous woman. And it's been written off so many times that this is just such a thing that we don't know how many people this man has killed. How many deaths were just alcohol poisoning, but they couldn't place him there. They couldn't link him to the room. They couldn't find his DNA. There was no proof he had ever been there because security footage and stuff. And what are they supposed to do? Go back on 30 years, 40 years of records trying to find women who died by alcohol poisoning. And even then, they linked him to 8 to 10 deaths, and they can't even justifiably prove what happened to him. What happened to them from what he does. And it's one of those cases that I find myself thinking about a lot. And when you think about serial killers, you think about, Jeffrey Dahmer or, BTK, these people that do these violent murders and they eventually do get caught and they get charged. And not all serial killers get caught, obviously, but just the fact that they could prove that he was around these women, they all died of alcohol poisoning, is really just a scary thought that this man literally figured out how to get away with murder. And he maybe in his lifetime served less than 10 years in prison. Less than 10 years, which is insane. And they kept putting him on probation, and he would violate it, get arrested for a little bit, and go back out and do these things. And even then, that woman, Barb Berkeley, she was just lucky that she lived and no charges could be pressed because they can't prove anything, especially depending on how drunk she was. She might not even remember him telling her to drink more. It's just, they could charge him with supplying a lethal amount of liquor, but they couldn't do anything. So this is kind of a case that's always bugged me. I always think about it. Not a lot of people talk about it, and I think it's probably because there's not I could list all the deaths, but it was just she died of alcohol poisoning in a hotel room. She died of alcohol poisoning in a hotel room, and that's not to minimize this to these women, but there's nothing substantial happened. He didn't get caught. He didn't get charges pressed. I mean, one of them died in his house. He never got charged for it, and it just blows my mind. So maybe this will just stick with you. Either way, I'm thinking about doing these about once a month where I talk about a true crime case. Well, there's a Sims build in the background. And please, I highly suggest you look into the missing Native and Indigenous women in Canada. Even if you're from a different country, there's cases also in the US in different areas, but it's very important that people pay attention to this sort of thing. And instead of screenshots today, I will be posting pictures of the women that are missing. I hope you have a good day.